Hello everyone, this is Taryn with Wonderfully Made Handcrafting, and today I'm working on day 8 of By the Wall for God's Pleasing in His Sight devotional. Now I had already written out this quote from Charles Spurgeon, who actually quoted John Bull, which says, "Thou lovest truth, not shadows or images, but realities. Thou lovest truth in the inward parts, inside truth, a true heart, a pure conscience. He is a Christian who is one inwardly." And so that was the main kind of point that I took from day 8's devotional. And so that is why I put that on the spiritual prescription card. And now I'm just working on this background. Now I definitely wanted a mixed media background. And so I started with some antique linen. And now I'm coming in with some gathered twigs around the edges. This really ages it nicely, but it is a little too dark for me. So I actually come back over with the antique linen to kind of smooth out those edges so they look more natural. Now, the benefit of having this all on video is realizing that I really liked the look of this, specifically right here with the antique linen over the gathered twigs on the edges. It's definitely a thing I want to recreate in a future page. However, in this particular Bible journaling page, it does get covered up. I end up making a couple things. Well, I guess they're not mistakes, but a couple things I wanted to switch. And so it kind of gets covered up a little bit. But anyways, I end up taking out this stamp set called Place Your Faith. This was from a couple kits ago, and it has these really cool just coffee rings or tea or whatever you want to have them be. I'm pretending they're coffee rings today. So I am stamping out some coffee rings in some gathered twigs Distress Oxide, and then I'm coming in with my Distress stains and coloring them in. I have ground espresso and frayed burlap, so I'll just color those rings in. I really prefer using multiple colors of brown to color in these coffee rings. When you have that, it just looks more natural, and so that's what I'm doing here with my water brush. So I will finish up this one at the top and then move down to the bottom. These are really nice little additions to a page. If you haven't picked up the Place Your Faith stamp set before, I will try to link it down below. I think it's still available in the store, but just check down below in the description for a link to it. I've just absolutely loved working through this kit. This has been one of my favorites. Number one, the devotional is spot on and something that I definitely needed to read. But I also love all the graphics with the cameras and florals. It makes it very easy to transition it to an antique or vintage looking Bible journaling page, which is completely my style if you haven't seen any of my other stuff. So I have really loved it. Unfortunately, our month has just been kind of crazy busy. My in-laws moved down here, and so it's just been a lot. So I will probably continue working through this kit on my own as we move on to next month's kit. So now I have taken out the Positionally Blameless floral stamp, and I didn't want it to be too harsh. And so I decided to just stamp it with some antique linen. I was hoping for tone on tone, but it just didn't pop enough. Not that I was really thinking it was going to pop, but it just didn't come out the way I wanted. But lucky for me, I just used antique linen, so all I'm doing is using that blending brush and blending that stamped image out while it's still wet, so you don't really see it at all. So if I were to go back in time, I would just put this cluster together and stop right there. But I decided to go on. I really like Nuvo Embellishment Mousse, but sometimes there's just a time and a place for things. And I haven't used this in a while, so I really wanted to, break it out and use it. This is the one that's, I think it's lemon. So it's a little bit of like a creamy yellowish. And I love the sheen that it gives, but it just wasn't working for me today. I tried to water it down a little bit and move it around with my hands, but I didn't like it. So I end up coming over with this antique linen and then also gathered twigs, trying to get those brown edges back, seeing maybe if that would help it, but it just doesn't help it. And so instead I take out my white gesso. Now I've been using this stuff like crazy lately. As you can see here, I'm still just trying to make it work and tone down the sheen a little bit with some Distress Oxide, but it's just going to come down to that white gesso. White gesso is somewhat see-through, so it doesn't look like you're going to be able to see much, of this as I am laying it down, but once it dries, it really does just tone everything down that is on the page. So you'll be able to see everything. You'll be able to see the coffee rings and a little bit of the different shades of color. I do add a little bit more shading in, but I wish I had added a little bit more as I look back on it now. So I'll make sure that the whole page is covered, and then I take my heat tool and just make sure that everything is good and dry before I start laying everything down. Like I said, it looks scary now, but once you add that heat tool, it really just tones down the background a little bit and it's not as scary. So you'll see here what it ended up looking like, and now I'm just adding that cluster again and making sure that it looks okay. And then I'm going to grab that gathered twigs and add just a fair amount of shading around the edges. I didn't want to add anything too drastic after all my background mishaps. But like I said before, if I were to do it over again, I'd probably just stop where I had that plain background with the antique linen and gathered twigs. But you know, it's hindsight bias kind of. So now I'm going to work on distressing this spiritual prescription card. All I'm doing is using the edge of my 9.5-inch Tim Holtz scissors. I find this to be the easiest way. And then I will add a little bit of that gathered twigs on all the edges. Now, what I do as well is I'm going to run this on the edge of my mixed media mat from Tim Holtz and Tonic. It has a little lip on it and it is smooth, and so what it'll kind of do is bend that card in a little bit. It makes it look a little bit more natural than just using your scissors or a distresser. So that is what I do with that. Now I did cut down this Polaroid before I even brought it over to the page. So I just cut that really close to the line, and now I'm adding this clear sticker that says whatever is true on it as well. Now, before I start putting this cluster together, I'm going to make sure I have all my ducks in a row and ready to go. So I end up distressing the outer edges of this camera, and then I'm also going to deconstruct one of the fabric tabbies that come in the kit. Now, this is a great way to use a fabric in a different way. If you don't always use these fabric tabbies, they are awesome when you deconstruct them because you have two pieces of fabric. And I actually cut mine down lengthwise, so I have a lot of fabric left if I ever wanted to do something like this as well. So I'll tuck that in by using my little tiny attacher. I just have that held together, much easier than going over to my sewing machine. And then I'll just start gluing things together. Like I've said a million times, I prefer to glue things off my page instead of gluing it on my page one by one. I just find it easier and you get the best placement that way. Now with these vellum florals, you will be able to see any normal glue that you use to hold these down. So a lot of times I choose to use my tiny attacher, but today I am using my Barely Arts precision glue just in the upper corners of these leaves. And I'm going to tuck that behind this spiritual prescription card to hopefully keep it in place. In the future, you'll see I use a little bit of something extra. But first off, I'm going to use some foam tape to prop up this camera, and the other part of that foam will actually hold on to that other single vellum floral. Now sitting here looking at this cluster, I decided I want a little something extra. Like I said before, originally I was going to have some more stuff in the background, but that didn't work out. So instead I take these clear stickers. Now oftentimes I don't use these as clear stickers. I actually just paste them on some white cardstock and make extra ephemera pieces for myself. But this time it works out because I have a lighter creamy background. So that was kind of a blessing in disguise when my whole background didn't work out the way I was thinking. So now I grab my Barely Arts precision glue. I'm making sure not to add any to the floral areas that you would be able to see from the front side. And so I am just going to smush that down, especially kind of hold it a little bit since that spiritual prescription card is a little bit on an angle and a rounded corner. So I'll just make sure that is good and dry before I move on. But here is where I decide to add a little bit more stability and glue to the back side of these floral pieces on the bottom. They were just a little too loose and floppy, so I decided to use some Glossy Accents. I use them in the darker areas of the florals, and plus Glossy Accents does dry clear, so it shouldn't cause any issue. To finish up this page, I grab some Nuvo drops in some Pumice stone color. I'll add that in 3 places so I have that kind of a triangle look, and then this page will be done. If you've enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe to my channel. You can also follow me over on Instagram at Wonderfully Made Handcrafting. I'll try to link everything I use down below that is still available, and I hope you have a wonderful day, guys. Bye.